Savona, New York, is the kind of small town where everyone knows everyone. Nestled amidst rolling hills and peaceful neighborhoods, it's a place where families feel safe letting their children play outside and walk to school. In the summer of 1993, the town was alive with the sound of children playing, a hallmark of the community's close-knit and friendly atmosphere. However, this idyllic setting was about to be shattered by a crime so shocking it would forever change the town's sense of security. On August 2, 1993, 13-year-old Eric Smith lured 4-year-old Derrick Robie into a wooded area near a local park. What began as an ordinary day for two children ended in an unthinkable tragedy that left Savona grappling with grief, anger, and confusion. The brutal nature of the crime, coupled with the young ages of both the victim and the perpetrator, made headlines across the nation, turning Savona into the epicenter of one of the most disturbing juvenile crime cases in American history. Derrick Robie was a bright and cheerful 4-year-old who loved making people smile. His parents, Dale and Doreen Robie, described him as a bundle of energy, always eager to explore and play. On the morning of August 2, Derrick asked his mother if he could walk to the local park by himself. It was only a short distance away, and the neighborhood was considered safe. Doreen reluctantly agreed, giving him a kiss and watching as he proudly made his way down the street. Derrick never made it to the park. At the same time, Eric Smith was roaming the neighborhood on his bike. Eric, with his bright red hair, freckles, and thick glasses, was often the target of bullying by his peers. Classmates teased him relentlessly, calling him names and making him feel isolated. Eric's frustrations festered, and he often struggled to control his emotions. While outwardly polite and well-mannered, Eric harbored a deep anger that would soon erupt in a horrifying way. Eric's home life was marked by challenges as well. His parents, who loved him deeply, were unaware of the extent of his emotional turmoil. Eric's feelings of rejection and loneliness found an outlet in violent fantasies, a warning sign that went unnoticed by those around him. On that fateful day, Eric's inner turmoil reached its breaking point. As Derrick walked toward the park, Eric spotted him and struck up a conversation. The two boys didn't know each other well, but Derrick's trusting nature made him easy to approach. Eric convinced Derrick to follow him into a nearby wooded area, promising it would be fun to explore. What happened next was nothing short of horrific. Once they were out of sight, Eric attacked Derrick, beating him with rocks and strangling him. The assault was brutal and calculated, driven by a mix of rage and a desire for control. Eric's actions shocked even seasoned investigators, who struggled to comprehend how a 13-year-old could commit such a violent act. When Derrick failed to return home, his parents grew worried and contacted the police. A search party was quickly organized, and it wasn't long before Derrick's lifeless body was found in the woods. The small town of Savona was plunged into grief as the news spread, leaving families fearful and confused. Who could have committed such a heinous act in their quiet, safe community? Eric Smith's name didn't immediately come up as a suspect. He was, after all, just another child in the neighborhood. But as investigators pieced together the timeline of events, Eric's odd behavior and conflicting statements began to raise red flags. A few days after Derrick's death, Eric's mother noticed her son acting strangely. He seemed distant and preoccupied, his usual energy replaced by an unsettling calm. Concerned, she questioned him, and to her horror, Eric confessed to killing Derrick. Unable to process the gravity of his admission, she contacted the authorities, setting in motion one of the most complex juvenile crime cases in U.S. history. The Robie family was devastated by the loss of their son. For Doreen Robie, the guilt of letting Derrick walk to the park alone was overwhelming. She couldn't have known the danger that awaited him, but the weight of that decision haunted her. The community rallied around the Robies, offering support and condolences, but no words could ease the pain of their loss. Meanwhile, the Smith family grappled with their own anguish. Eric's confession left them stunned, forcing them to confront a horrifying truth about their son. As the investigation unfolded, the question on everyone's mind was, how could a 13-year-old commit such a brutal crime? The stage was set for a legal battle that would delve into the mind of a young killer and challenge society's understanding of juvenile crime. As the case progressed, it would raise critical questions about justice, accountability, and the capacity for rehabilitation. But for now, the town of Savona could only mourn and wait for answers, their sense of safety shattered by an act of unimaginable violence. In the next part, we will explore the psychological evaluations, the trial, and the complex factors that shaped Eric Smith's actions and the court's response to his crime. After Eric Smith confessed to killing Derrick Robie, law enforcement and mental health professionals were faced with the daunting task of understanding what drove a 13-year-old to commit such a horrific act. Eric's youth, combined with the brutality of the crime, made this case deeply complex and unsettling. Eric underwent extensive psychological evaluations to determine the state of his mind at the time of the crime. Experts sought to answer critical questions. Was Eric capable of understanding the consequences of his actions? What internal or external factors may have influenced him? And most importantly, could Eric be rehabilitated? Eric's behavior before the crime suggested a troubled child struggling with emotional and social challenges. Bullying and isolation. Eric's red hair, freckles, and glasses made him a target for relentless bullying. Classmates called him names, mocked his appearance, and excluded him from social activities. These experiences led to deep feelings of anger, rejection, and inadequacy. Struggles with anger management. Family members and teachers described Eric as having difficulty controlling his emotions. Small frustrations often escalated into outbursts, and he displayed signs of bottled-up rage. Animal cruelty, a chilling precursor to violent behavior. Eric was known to harm small animals, a behavior often linked to deeper psychological disturbances. Desire for power. Experts noted that Eric's feelings of powerlessness in social and family settings may have fueled his desire to exert control, a motive that tragically manifested in the murder of Derrick Robie. Psychologists conducted a series of tests and interviews to assess Eric's mental state. Several key findings emerged: impulsivity and emotional immaturity. Despite his age, Eric exhibited emotional immaturity that made it difficult for him to process complex emotions like frustration or rejection. This immaturity contributed to his impulsive decision to commit the crime. Anger and resentment. Eric's pent-up anger, stemming from years of bullying and social isolation, played a significant role in his actions. Psychologists noted that the crime was not premeditated but rather an explosive release of this anger. Lack of empathy. Eric showed limited understanding of the pain he caused Derrick and his family. While he acknowledged his actions, he initially struggled to grasp the gravity of the consequences. No major mental illness. Despite his troubling behavior, Eric did not exhibit signs of psychopathy or major mental illness. This finding complicated the narrative, as his actions could not be easily attributed to a diagnosable condition. During his interviews, Eric provided a chilling account of the events leading up to Derrick's murder. He admitted that his anger toward the world, combined with an opportunity to exert control, drove him to commit the act. Eric described feeling a sense of power during the assault, a stark contrast to the helplessness he often felt in his daily life. What made Eric's confession particularly haunting was the calm and detailed manner in which he recounted the crime. This demeanor shocked investigators, who struggled to reconcile Eric's childlike appearance with the brutality of his actions. Eric's home life was another critical factor examined by investigators and psychologists. While his parents loved him, their family dynamic was far from perfect. Strict discipline. Eric's father was described as a strict disciplinarian, which may have contributed to Eric's feelings of inadequacy and fear of failure. Emotional support. though his mother was caring, Eric often felt emotionally distant from his family, further exacerbating his sense of isolation. Generational trauma. Some experts speculated that unresolved issues within the family's history could have indirectly influenced Eric's behavior. Though this theory remained speculative, Eric's motives were complex and multifaceted. Blending psychological, social, and situational factors, a desire for control, years of feeling powerless drove Eric to seek a situation where he could assert dominance. Tragically, Derrick Robie became the target of this misplaced need for control, misplaced anger. Eric's rage toward his bullies and his feelings of rejection were channeled into Derrick, an innocent and vulnerable victim. Opportunity. The unplanned nature of the crime suggested that Eric acted impulsively when presented with an opportunity to vent his frustrations. As Eric's psychological profile was revealed during the investigation, the public reaction was mixed. Some viewed Eric as a deeply troubled child who needed help and rehabilitation. Others saw him as a dangerous individual whose actions warranted severe punishment. This dichotomy reflected broader societal debates about juvenile crime. Should young offenders be treated as adults and held fully accountable for their actions, or should their age and circumstances mitigate their culpability? The findings from Eric's psychological evaluations would play a pivotal role in the upcoming trial. The court would need to determine whether Eric's actions were the result of inherent malice or a tragic culmination of his life circumstances. As the trial approached, the nation braced itself for a legal battle that would test the boundaries of justice, rehabilitation, and accountability. In the next part, we will explore the courtroom drama, the legal strategies employed by both the prosecution and defense, and the ultimate verdict that divided public opinion. As the trial of Eric Smith began, the small town of Savona, New York, became the focus of national attention. The brutal murder of 4-year-old Derrick Robie by a 13-year-old boy had left the community in shock, grappling with questions of justice and accountability. Should a child who committed such a heinous crime be tried as an adult, or should his age and troubled background be taken into account? This question would divide the public, legal experts, and even the families involved. Prosecution's case. A calculated killer. The prosecution painted Eric Smith as a calculated and dangerous individual who fully understood the consequences of his actions. They argued that his crime, luring Derrick into the woods, brutally attacking him, and then leaving him to die, was not an impulsive act but a deliberate one. Key points presented by the prosecution included premeditation. Eric had chosen Derrick as his victim, lured him into a secluded area, and used objects found nearby to carry out the attack. The prosecution emphasized the deliberate nature of these actions, brutality of the crime. The evidence revealed the extent of Derrick's injuries, highlighting the excessive violence used. This, the prosecution argued, demonstrated a level of intent and malice far beyond what could be attributed to impulsivity. Public safety. Prosecutors argued that Eric's actions showed a dangerous propensity for violence, making it essential to hold him accountable to protect the community. The defense countered by focusing on Eric's age, psychological state, and history of bullying and emotional trauma. They argued that Eric's actions were the result of years of pent-up anger and frustration, exacerbated by his inability to process complex emotions. Emotional immaturity. As a 13-year-old, Eric lacked the emotional and cognitive maturity to fully understand the consequences of his actions. His decision-making was influenced by his developmental stage and the intense emotions he was experiencing. Bullying and isolation. The defense highlighted the relentless bullying Eric endured and its impact on his mental health. They argued that these experiences contributed to his feelings of powerlessness and the misplaced anger that led to the crime. Potential for rehabilitation. Rather than focusing solely on punishment, the defense emphasized Eric's capacity for change. They called on psychological experts to testify that with proper intervention, Eric could be rehabilitated and reintegrated into society. One of the most pivotal moments in the trial was Eric's testimony. He spoke in a calm and measured tone, recounting the events of August 2, 1993, with chilling detail. Eric expressed remorse for his actions, saying, "I didn't understand why I did it at the time. I was just so angry, and I didn't know how to stop." While his testimony was meant to show his regret and humanity, it also highlighted the complexity of his case. Eric's ability to articulate his feelings and describe the crime in detail left some jurors and spectators questioning whether he truly grasped the enormity of his actions. Both the prosecution and defense relied heavily on expert witnesses to support their arguments. For the prosecution, psychologists and forensic experts testified that Eric's actions demonstrated premeditation and a lack of empathy, suggesting a high risk of future violent behavior. For the defense, experts argued that Eric's behavior was a product of his environment and emotional immaturity, emphasizing that he showed no signs of psychopathy or incurable mental illness. They presented evidence that Eric had the potential to be rehabilitated with proper treatment. After days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict: Eric Smith was found guilty of second-degree murder. The decision reflected the jury's belief that Eric's actions were intentional and deliberate. But it also acknowledged his age and the mitigating factors presented by the defense. Eric Smith was sentenced to the maximum penalty allowed for a juvenile at the time, 9 years to life in prison. This sentence meant that Eric would serve a minimum of 9 years before becoming eligible for parole, with his case reviewed periodically to determine whether he could be safely released. The verdict and sentence elicited mixed reactions. Support for the sentence: many believed that justice had been served, viewing Eric's punishment as appropriate for the severity of his crime. They argued that Derrick Robie's family deserved closure and that Eric's actions warranted significant consequences. Calls for compassion: others felt that the sentence was too harsh for a 13-year-old, emphasizing the need for rehabilitation rather than prolonged incarceration. They argued that Eric's age and circumstances should have been given more weight in determining his sentence. For Derrick Robie's family, the verdict provided some measure of justice but did little to ease their grief. Doreen and Dale Robie spoke publicly about the devastating loss of their son, emphasizing the importance of remembering Derrick's life rather than focusing solely on the crime. For Eric Smith, the verdict marked the start of a long journey through the justice system. As he began serving his sentence, questions about his capacity for rehabilitation and the fairness of his punishment continued to spark debate. The trial may have concluded, but the story of Eric Smith was far from over. In the next part, we will explore Eric's life in prison, his multiple parole hearings, and the enduring impact of this case on juvenile justice in the United States. In October 2021, after nearly 3 decades in prison, Eric Smith was granted parole. By this point, he was 41 years old and had spent the majority of his life behind bars. The decision to release him was met with mixed reactions. Supporters of Eric's release pointed to his extensive efforts at rehabilitation and his clear remorse for his actions. Critics, however, argued that the severity of his crime warranted continued incarceration. Eric's release came with strict conditions, including close supervision and ongoing counseling. He expressed a desire to lead a quiet life, far removed from the spotlight that had followed him since the day of Derrick's murder. For the Robie family, Eric's release was a devastating reminder of the tragedy they had endured. Doreen and Dale Robie consistently opposed Eric's parole, arguing that the pain of losing Derrick would never fade and that Eric's actions deserved a life sentence. Despite the parole board's decision, the Robie family's grief remained ever present, highlighting the lasting impact of Derrick's loss on their lives. Since his release, Eric has sought to rebuild his life and contribute positively to society. He has maintained a low profile, adhering to the conditions of his parole and focusing on personal growth. His journey serves as a powerful example of the complexities of juvenile justice and the potential for redemption. However, Eric's story also underscores the ongoing challenges faced by individuals reintegrating into society after long-term incarceration. The case of Eric Smith remains a landmark in discussions about juvenile justice and the treatment of young offenders. It raises critical questions about how society should address crimes committed by children and the balance between accountability and the possibility of rehabilitation. Should juveniles who commit severe crimes be given the opportunity to reform? How should the justice system support both victims' families and offenders seeking redemption? What role does society play in preventing similar tragedies through education and mental health support? For Derrick Robie's family, the pain of their loss continues to be a defining part of their lives. For Eric Smith, the challenge of proving that he has changed will remain a lifelong endeavor. And for society, this case serves as a poignant reminder of the complexities and responsibilities inherent in the pursuit of justice. The Eric Smith case is not just a story of tragedy, it is also a story of reflection and learning. It compels society to confront difficult questions about crime, punishment, and the capacity for change. As we move forward, may the lessons of this case guide us in creating a justice system that balances accountability with compassion, and a society that prioritizes prevention, support, and understanding.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss any of our videos. We bring you the most intriguing and mysterious true crime stories. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this content, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Join us on this journey to uncover the truth today.